Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Wistrcill.
I'm JT Wistrcill.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of From the Couch. Here we are. We're talking NFL 2010s, the past decade. JT finally saw these players play live.
Yes.
So that's a good thing.
I was finally into the NFL.
In your analysis, yes, you were. So give me your impressions of the players in the 2010s.
I mean, obviously I fell in love with this decade, so you'll see a Viking pop up on my list. But I mean, overall, just I think there's a lot of really good players that, as of right now, don't get the recognition they deserve because they're still playing. I think when you look at how some of these guys match up to some of the greatest to ever play, you look and see a lot of their numbers like today are better than they were back then. No, in some ways it's a different game. But when I think a lot of these guys are done, we're going to look back and go, he was one of the best to play his position. But right now, we're not talking about that.
Yeah, good point. So, again, how we do this is we'll do 5 defensive players, 5 offensive players. We'll start at the bottom. Start with defense. So, JT, you're up first. Yeah. Defense, number 5.
I got Darrelle Revis, cornerback for the Jets and Patriots, who had... He was really good for the first half of this decade. Good enough, I think he deserved a spot at number 5. His nickname, Revis Island, because he absolutely shut and locked guys down. The most yards he ever let a player get in a game while he was like just on him per se, the entire game, 58 in a single game. He has shut down Randy Moss, Ocho Cinco, Calvin Johnson. He shut them all down. He's a true shutdown corner, like I said. He plays the ball extremely well. He's just great in those one-on-one situations. 140 passes deflected, and I think he absolutely deserves to be on this list because he's one of the best to ever play the corner position in that short stretch. Few can match his peak, and is why he's at 5.
Okay. All right. I stayed in the defensive backfield like you, but I was choosing between Darrelle Revis and Patrick Peterson.
Yes.
That's who I went with.
Very good player.
Patrick Peterson, 8 Pro Bowls, one more than Revis got. So when you think about playing cornerback in the NFL and all fresh new receivers that are coming in the league, and you go to 8 Pro Bowls, that's a long career there at corner. So all pro 3-time, 25 interceptions. Again, interceptions is a little misleading stat because if they never throw the ball your way, you're not getting many interceptions. So
yeah, Revis only had 29.
I really struggled with Peterson and Revis. I went with Peterson because of the longevity.
Yes.
The 8 Pro Bowls. So that's why Peterson's my number 5.
Absolutely think that's the key too. You went with longevity, I went peak. 2 very great players either way.
Okay. All right. Number 4 on defense.
Luke Kuechly. I always mess up his name.
Kuechly,
linebacker for the Carolina Panthers. Just the definition of a leader, like a true leader for this decade. When he was drafted in 2012, he won Rookie of the Year. The year after that, won Defensive Player of the Year in 2013. The only player to also ever do that is, what's his name? I just blanked out his name. Lawrence Taylor.
Lawrence Taylor.
Totally blanked out his name.
He was pretty good.
Lawrence Taylor. Also, he went to more straight. Only one linebacker's ever been to more straight Pro Bowls than him, Mike Singletary. But let's talk about what makes Kuechly himself so great. The IQ. He would call out offenses plays so many times, so the players know they're in trouble on the offensive side so many times when he studies and watches so much film. A surefire tackler, and he called it a career a little early, but a great player and a really great linebacker and deserves a spot on this list, and I think comes in number 4 for me.
Okay. Good choice. I might have him later.
I figured you would.
I've got Von Miller as my number 4. Again, longevity, 8 Pro Bowls, 3-time All-Pro. You know, he's a little bit under the radar right now, but I mean, still a consistent, force on the defensive side of the ball. And again, I looked at longevity over the decade. I'm like, who just consistently produced at a high level? Obviously, he was a Super Bowl MVP. That always helps, which is hard to do on the defensive side of the ball. But the bottom line is he had a long peak and is still one of the great players on the defensive side of the ball. Von Miller, my number 4. So, all right, number 3, who you got?
I have Von Miller at number 3.
Okay.
So you hit on a lot of things. I think the reason he's slightly ahead of Kuechly for me is I really love his performance in the Super Bowl. And honestly, I think when you're so great players like that, I gave a little edge to the guy who had one of the best performances we've ever seen. Like you said, so hard to win MVP of the Super Bowl on the defensive side of the ball. But the 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles in that Super Bowl against the Panthers, I think set him apart for me. He has 106 sacks for the decade, 22 forced fumbles as well, and just the bend around the edge, the speed, the variety of pass rush moves, and he can still get it done today. I think when it's all said and done, he could easily be one of the top 5 guys in sacks all time, and comes in at number 3 for me. A true sack artist in Von Miller.
Okay, so I have Luke Kuechly here for 2 reasons. He won Defensive Player of the Year. Von Miller didn't.
That's true.
And I think his position demands more versatility than Von Miller's does.
Yeah,
Kuechly has to drop back in pass coverage. He's got to cover guys out of the backfield. He's got to make tackles on the run play. I think they have an equally successful career.
Yeah.
Von Miller happened to play in the Super Bowl. Luke Kuechly didn't. No fault of his own.
He did, actually. He played against Von Miller.
That's right. You're right. You're right. They did lose. That's a good point. I forgot that. But the bottom line is, I'm just saying, I think Luke Kuechly played a tougher position for longer, and they share roughly the same awards, all pros and Pro Bowls. So I put Kuechly ahead there. So he's my number 3. So good discussion there.
It is. Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention with Kuechly, really quick, just 100 tackles every year he played too. I think people don't realize how difficult that is. But he got it done. Yep.
So it's okay to be wrong. You should have had Kuechly 3 like me.
You should trademark that. You use it every episode.
That's all right. That's all right. It's okay to be wrong. So, all right. 2 and 1. I'm going to guess we might have the same players. But who's your number 2?
One of my favorite football players, not on my own team, of all time. I love my number 2, Aaron Donald, defensive tackle for the Rams, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, absolute dominating interior force. Thing that stands out about Aaron Donald is his quickness off the snap. He is so fast. Sometimes teams try to double him, and they can't even get there quick enough, and they know the snap count. His speed is insane. His hands are insane. We've all seen the video where he's blocking knives. They're plastic. They're not real knives, but still his reaction time, his quickness. He had over 20 sacks in a season, the most ever by a defensive tackle. And like I said, Aaron Donald is an absolutely dominant player. Already has 72 sacks, 312 tackles for his career. And I honestly believe he could go down as the best defensive tackle to ever play the game. That good. The 2-time Defensive Player of the Year for this decade, Aaron Donald.
So Aaron Donald's my number 2 as well. All the things you just mentioned. He's so dominant that it is, when you flip on the film of him, you realize that, you're kind of shocked he can get any stats.
I know.
The way they try to double team him and the way they scheme away from him and all this other stuff. It's like he must be a great player, but he never makes any tackles or sacks. Well, that's wrong. He still makes plays.
Yes.
And so I agree with you. He could go down as one of the best ever. And, he's probably, right at the tail end of his peak as well. So he's probably got 2 or 3 years here still where he could really make some noise. So I guess we'll wait and see. But obviously an awesome player to watch. And if it wasn't for the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, which is coming up, I believe, he would definitely be number 1 on most any list.
And I love what you said about teams scheming away from him and all they do. There's a reason during the Super Bowl he didn't get a sack or have a ton of stats in general. Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time, was scheming, and so was Josh McDaniels, to make sure he couldn't affect the game. But a lot of people go, oh, he didn't have a great Super Bowl, so therefore he's not a great player. I hate that argument personally.
Those are the people that don't watch film. Right there. Yes. Okay. All right. So number 1, go Badgers.
Regardless if you watch the film or not, you know the name J.J. Watt. He's got his own TV show at this point. He's moved into Saturday Night Live. He is so dominant on the field, it's led to opportunities off the field. But let's focus on that on the field dominance. He's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Only other player to do that, Lawrence Taylor. He's so dominant. He has 96 sacks for his career, and if it wasn't for the injuries, it'd be so much more. But he's so versatile. He can line up all over the offensive line to try to get over the defensive line to expose mismatches on the offensive line. His best strength, I think, is his motor, and he's an extremely tough player as well. He's so strong. He can rip through guys. He's tall enough to swim over them as well. But that relentless effort is what got him those 3 Defensive Player of the Years. And when he was winning that, the Texans teams weren't winning a lot either. So he was able to dominate despite being a guy like teams could really focus in on because the Texans didn't have the best defense. But coming in at number 1, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, J.J. Watt for me.
Yeah,
Go Badgers.
J.J. Watt's number 1. Go Badgers. From Pewaukee, Wisconsin, Pewaukee High School. How about that? J.J. Watt. And, certainly dominant. I think if you look at the entire decade, it's easy to put him number 1. If you just looked at the last 5 years, you might put Aaron Donald there. But we look at the whole decade, it's been him. And you're right. Unfortunately, injuries have set him back a little bit in recent years. But nonetheless, was a great, has been a great player. And, we just need one more year, and hopefully he can come be a Pittsburgh Steeler with his 2 brothers. That would be great. But he's a clear number 1. And, again, you don't win. 3 Defensive Player of the Years in a row? Are you kidding me?
Just ridiculous.
So that was pretty awesome. Well, not in a row. He had 12, 14, 15. But just to win 3 of them. If people are talking about you with Lawrence Taylor,
yes,
that's pretty crazy talk there. So, anyway. I love the defensive players on this. So let's move over to the offense, JT. Where are you at with number 5 on offense?
This is a guy who dominated but didn't get the accolades J.J. Watt did. Joe Thomas, left tackle for the Cleveland Browns. He was a Pro Bowler 10 times. He's one of only players to be a 10-time Pro Bowler in his first 10 seasons. The only time he wasn't a Pro Bowler, the year he only played 7 games his final year. Never missed a snap. He had 10,363 snaps, and he only gave up 30 sacks for his entire career. So it's less than a sack a game, obviously. 130 games without a sack as well. Just absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, he was just so dominant. His pass protection was amazing. His punch, he was able to just stop guys dead in their tracks. So good on that side of the ball. If the Browns had one more, more people would talk about him as an all-time great offensive lineman, I truly believe. I think that's the only reason he doesn't get talked about more as one of the best to ever do it. Because when it comes to, especially the run game, he's maybe not be all the way up there. But when we're talking just pass protection, I think he's one of the best to ever do it. Easily top 3 for me.
Yep, and go Badgers.
Go Badgers again.
Right, here we go. All right, number 5. I really struggled with 5. I had 2 receivers. I went back and forth 3 different times. And I'll tell you why I settled on Antonio Brown as my number 5. And my Steeler bias was not the reason why. Because obviously it's been a train wreck the last year and a half. So I'm not happy with AB and the way it ended with the Steelers. Why would he ruin a good thing, right? But anyway, okay, so let's talk about AB. 7 Pro Bowls, 4 All-Pros. Twice he led the league in yardage and receptions, okay? But here's the reason why he was there. He's in 75 touchdowns in the decade.
Amazing.
6 consecutive years. He had 100 catches, 1,200 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So 6 consecutive years. Again, that longevity at a peak, where you're one of the elite for that long, it's really hard to keep you. I would really struggle between him and Larry Fitzgerald. I went back and forth because Larry Fitzgerald also went to 7 Pro Bowls and led 2-time receiving and TD leader. But he didn't have the long peak that Antonio Brown did in the good old days of 4 or 5 years ago for him. So that's why Antonio Brown is my number 5. So, all right.
AB, a great receiver. Also, shout out to Julio Jones. Won't make my list, but another guy who's just great.
Exactly.
Number 4.
Okay, 4 for
time
you.
for my bias. Adrian Peterson, running back for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, look, the peak wasn't super long, but when it was there, I mean, it was amazing. The yards from scrimmage, he won an MVP in 2012. He just shattered records. And what made him so effective? He hit the holes so hard. True I formation back, get that running start, just be able to power through guys. Combination of speed, power, and toughness really exemplified it. He's a 7-time All-Pro, a 7-time Pro Bowler as well, a 3-time rushing leader, and 5th all-time in total yards. So love Adrian Peterson, and think at his peak, he's one of the best backs to ever play it. And he's not as good as he used to be, obviously, but he's able to continue along and get the longevity to build those stats up for those amazing seasons he had, in which he accumulated 2,000 yards rushing, just finishing short of Eric Dickerson's record. So Adrian Peterson at number 4 for me.
Okay. My number 4, you already talked about him, Joe Thomas.
Oh, you had him
I have him
and the
high.
first offensive lineman for my dad to make the list. That's a win.
Go Badgers.
Gotta
but
be
the
back.
longevity is just amazing. And he's a really nice guy, having met him
That's true.
before. So, you know, again, you talked about it. I mean, over 10,000 consecutive snaps, you know, not missing a game with any injuries, playing tackle. So easy to have Joe Thomas on the list. I can have him that high because he was that good.
Yes, he was.
And like I said, when you're that good and you have that type of longevity, I mean, for him to get the recognition even he did get playing on such a bad team, that shows the respect he had around the NFL for so long. So Joe Thomas at number 4.
He played with 6 different coaches and 20 quarterbacks, and he's only 11 years on the team. 20 quarterbacks in 11 years?
Yep.
Dysfunction.
Just remember, the winningest quarterback in Cleveland in the 10s is Ben Roethlisberger. and that's a true stat right there. He's won more games in Cleveland than any quarterback in Cleveland. So there you go. All right.
Steeler that fat.
Number 3, what do you got?
Let's stick with the quarterbacks. Let's go to Drew Brees for the New Orleans Saints. I mean, just the model of consistency. You know what? Maybe he could have made a late push for our 2000s ones. I thought at the tail end, once he teamed up with Sean Payton, did win that Super Bowl. But overall in this decade, I thought he was better. Had his most 5,000 yards passing seasons and like that. Just Never the most athletic guy, never had the biggest arm, but always found ways to get it done because he was so accurate. He understood the offense so well. He distributed the ball so well too, so you weren't able to focus in on one guy as well. So Drew Brees, he was a Super Bowl champion, 13-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Offensive Rookie of the Year. Has not won an MVP surprisingly, but a great player he actually leads almost every single all-time stat, passing yards, completions, touchdowns. So Drew Brees, he just hasn't won quite enough at the top I think to be higher on this list, but the accolades are amazing for Drew.
So I thought about a third quarterback on my list, and I couldn't do it.
Oh, really?
And so I'm really shocked that I have Adrian Peterson above you.
That's surprising.
I looked at this decade and I was looking at the running backs thinking, it's a passing league now, right? Some running backs are about catching the ball out of the backfield. It's not handing the ball off. But who was the elite guy that could do it this decade? And you talked about him already, Adrian Peterson. It's too bad that people now, or people that are just getting the NFL the last couple of years, that's what they think Adrian Peterson was. They don't remember the way he was 7-8 years ago, when he was by far the best back in the league. Yeah. And so that's why I have him there. He won an MVP. And, again, as I think about guys like a Drew Brees, like that type of stuff, stats are awesome, but stats aren't everything.
That's true.
And so there's a reason that Adrian Peterson was the best back of the decade and won an MVP. So I was glad to have my running back at number 3. And like I said, I'm very disappointed you're purple in your purple when I have your guy higher than you do. So anyway.
I think,
all right. Well, I have a feeling we'll spend some time on quarterbacks here now. So.
We will, yeah.
So considering that the only MVP in the decade that wasn't a quarterback was Adrian Peterson.
Yes.
Everybody else was, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, obviously the ones we're going to talk about. But, it's pretty amazing. You get only one non-quarterback for the whole decade. So, all right, number 2, JT, where are you?
Aaron Rodgers, and I should have mentioned this with Drew Brees as well. I personally, I'm a recent football guy, so I'll have some bias. I believe all of these guys are top five guys to play the position, all 3 of these QBs, and that's why I feel like they needed to be in the top 5 for me, because they were all that good. So Aaron Rodgers, he did not, why is ahead of Drew Brees? He did not have the things Drew Brees had. He didn't have as good a play caller. He didn't have as good of a weapons. Has not had as good as offensive line. Offensive line's been good, but not as good. Aaron Rodgers, just so many wow and amazing plays. The deep ball is unbelievable. The amazing comebacks, the ability to, he is so good escaping the pocket, making throws, moving around the pocket, adjusting, buying his guys time. The sidearm throws, all kinds of crazy, wacky ways he gets it done too. And he was a Super Bowl champion, 2-time MVP as well, an 8-time Pro Bowler, and just so smart. And the discount double check, the relax, he's got it all. And he's already so high on the all-time stats for QBs as well. Love Aaron Rodgers and think he might be the most talented quarterback we've ever seen.
So I have Aaron Rodgers at 2 as well. Yeah. And I remember when the Packers drafted him, and all my Packer friends, which there are many of them, just couldn't believe what's he going to take Brett Favre? How can he be better than Brett Favre? People freaked up there, wondering what would happen. And then a couple years later, like, oh, yeah, okay, now we know why we got rid of Brett Favre. And he has the best arm of any quarterback I've ever seen. I've been watching the NFL for a long time, 40 years. And he can make every throw look effortless. When you watch his motion, it's just a little flick, and the ball goes 40 yards on a dime. And so that's the true way to judge a quarterback in their arm strength. Does it look like it's effortless or not? And for him, it is. And played at Cal, jumped in the league, played behind Favre, sat behind Favre for a little bit, and then took over. And since then has been, if not basically in the discussion of one of the best quarterbacks ever. Yeah. So fun to watch, and hopefully he's got a couple good years left in him. But we'll see. But it's sure been fun. Hard to believe that he's been in the league since 2005.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if we get a deja vu somehow where a Jordan Love, there was a lot of outrage there, if somehow he's able to become a really successful successor to Rodgers.
Yep. I think Rodgers plays one more year in Green Bay, and then he replaces Roethlisberger in Pittsburgh.
I knew that was coming.
I like that. Let's get him in the black and gold. So, all right, number 1, I'm pretty sure we got the same guy here. So.
It's GOAT time. Tom Brady, 6-time Super Bowl champion. Could have been in last decade. Decided to put him in this decade because I thought the stats were slightly more impressive. He's also won 3 MVPs. He's a 14-time Pro Bowler. Just insane. So what stands out about Brady? Brady, he was, I believe, a 6th-round pick,
Yep,
right?
sixth-round pick.
He worked so hard, and it really shows for his age, too. He was able to finally get 1,000 career rushing yards 2 seasons ago, and he is, like I said, the work ethic, the accuracy. He understands if guys blitz, he gets rid of the ball so quickly. He understands where everyone is going. He's just mastered the system. He has mastered the mental part and the work ethic, and even though he's got a pretty good arm, I think that's made up for he's not as naturally talented as an Aaron Rodgers. So, and he comes up so clutch. I mean, 28-3, anybody? Comeback, probably the defining moment of his career in this decade. So absolutely love Tom Brady. And he's probably the greatest quarterback to ever play and probably the greatest football player. Yeah. So he's got to be at number 1 in one of these decades. And for me, it's the 2010s.
Yep. Same here. He's second in all time in passing yards, second in touchdown passes, tied for 5th in career passer rating. He's the most accurate thrower of the ball I've ever seen. And just is a consistent winner. Nothing rattles him.
Yeah.
He's emotional, though. I mean, he's into the game. You can see him getting after the guys. But, he's been in a good system with the same head coach. But he's also had to weather the storm with a lot of different types of players he's had to play with.
Elevated a lot of guys.
Receiving crew, running backs. It's hard to name the running back crew he's had. He's had a decent line, and he's had a good defense. They've always had a very solid defense. Belichick obviously coaching the D. But nonetheless, I mean, as much as I hate to admit it, 6 Super Bowls, it's hard to argue against Tom Brady being the best quarterback ever. And he's pretty easy to put him here at number 1 if you're looking at stats plus wins. That's where he is. If all the players say they're playing for rings, there's only one player who's got 6, and one quarterback who has 6. So easy to put him there. So there we go. Well, we had to leave off some players as we talked about on this list, but
Gronk.
I think our list is top heavy.
Yes.
I mean, I think we're at the top of the offensive defense. We have a couple guys, some guys who could be the best players ever.
Yes.
And like you said on the beginning part, so that was fun. So like we did last time, I assume next time we'll be projecting now the best players in the 2020s. So we'll have to do a little futuristic research on that. And know that some of these players have dropped off now. So what do you think?
Shout out. And also I just wanted to throw in this shout out to my favorite football moment of all time, the Minneapolis Miracle. Had to rock the shirt. I just absolutely love it's my favorite sports play of all time, and I'll never forget the day it happened. So had to rock the Minneapolis Miracle, and my favorite moment of the decade and in my sports fandom.
There you go. Well, great. Well, we certainly hope you enjoyed another tour of the NFL. We have the 2010s, this edition of From the Couch, and we'll see you next time.